Welcome to this video lecture, Understanding Project Management, a Practical Guide, second edition, Chapter 10, Communications Planning. So let's get started on today's topic. So we are continuing our journey through the planning phase, and we can see that we are now in the final topic for the planning phase, communications planning. Now, again, to emphasize, this does not mean you do communications planning last within the planning period of time during a project. It would certainly be intermingled with all of the other planning functions. We just happen to be talking about it as the final topic. But again, does not mean that these are done sequentially. So on our agenda, there are three questions we are going to answer. First of all, what should be communicated? Secondly, how should project documents be stored during this project? And finally, how should project meetings be managed during the project? So those are the three main questions of communications planning. Now, the first one, what should be communicated? Now, just to step back for a moment, and the statement, which I consider to be very true, the value of effective communication during a project cannot be overstated. That is, the lack of communication or ineffective communication will most surely detract from the success of a project to the point of causing it to be unsuccessful or a failure. There is no doubt of the absolute connection between communication and effective project delivery. Again, that cannot be overstated. So this is a significant area of planning, and one that is often overlooked or not given enough focus. It's expected in some ways. There's sort of an implicit expectation that planning communication will just happen naturally during a project, and that's nothing could be further from the truth. Once the project gets going and things get busy, communication often falls to the wayside. So it's very important to effectively plan for communication. This plan, the communication plan, should include the communication of project information to allow for the effective communication of information related to the project, and the communication specifically of project status information of where we are on the project. So as usual, let's watch the ongoing case study for the creation of the communication management plan. So let's watch this video together.
Sophie begins to think about the communications that should occur during the project. How much communication is needed? It would be nice to have frequent meetings, but when would the work itself get done? Should there be more face-to-face interaction or more information posted online? How often should the information be produced? All these questions pass through Sophie's mind as she considers how to plan the communications. She then asks herself, who is it that the project needs to communicate with? The answer is clear: the project stakeholders. With this insight, she pulls out the stakeholder register and lists each stakeholder on a blank sheet of paper. She considers the different reasons why she might have to communicate with them, such as providing a status update or a review of daily work tasks. She then proceeds to list the reasons under each stakeholder name. Sophie considers different communication mediums, such as video meetings, in-person meetings, emails, or written reports, and asks herself which one would be the most effective for each of the requirements on her list. Next, she considers the timing. When should one-time communications occur? How often should recurring communications occur? As Sophie finishes this process, she reviews the results of her work, a document outlining the various communications that will be performed during the project. While she knows that effective communication will be an ongoing challenge, she's feeling a lot more confident now that she has a plan.
Okay, so we saw the communication plan being generated as part of that as part of that video. The project manager, Sophie, we saw reviewed the stakeholder register to ensure she understands the needs, the communication needs of each stakeholder. It's again going back to the work that we did during stakeholder planning to review who all the stakeholders are, and to help her understand and think of what their needs are, and specifically in the area of communication. What information, what type of information would each stakeholder need? 'Cause it's not necessarily the same for each. The information that your project sponsor needs to receive is very different from the information that a team member who is performing the work of the project needs to receive and to have access to. So those are very different needs. And part of communication planning is to understand those differences. And she also considers the communication medium. For example, for some things, perhaps a face-to-face meeting is warranted. In other cases, perhaps an email may suffice. And it's those differences. It's not one size fits all. It depends on the type of communication, and is it interactive? Is it back and forth, or is it a one-way communication? Those are things that go into determining the communication medium. And what is useful here is for you to look at the communication management plan, the completed communication management plan for the case study in the textbook. You can see that in chapter 10. So the overall key idea: create a plan for project communications based on the information needs of the project stakeholders. Okay, the second question now: how should project documents be stored? This is now another key question, because during a project, there will be a large number of project documents. There's a large amount of project information that is stored in documentation and documents that are created and need to be accessible, both during the project but after the project is completed. Now, normally without a plan of where to store these documents and how to organize them, it will become increasingly difficult to find and update them throughout the project. It's not likely that they will be spontaneously organized for easy access and location. It will become increasingly difficult to find them, which will then bog down the project. Because if you can't find the information, if you don't know where the document containing decisions and information about the scope, for example, the project will start to decrease in efficiency. So it's very important to have a plan in place as to how document will be stored and organized. So again, let's view the ongoing case study video in this area of documentation guidelines.
Sophie knows from past experience that effective communication is vital for her project. More often than not, whenever one of her projects has underperformed, the root cause was a problem with the way people communicated with each other. During her last project, it was difficult for her project team to find the latest project documents. A great deal of time and effort was spent figuring out where documents were stored, and, in some cases, mistakes were made because an incorrect document was used. This time, Sophie plans to set out the guidelines at the start of the project. Sophie plans to store all documents on the project website using a new document management system recently purchased by Deco Productions. Folders will be set up to logically organize the documents, and the company standard for project file names will be used. Lastly, Sophie will designate the documents that will require versions to be maintained.
Okay, so let's debrief the what happened during that video. So we saw that the project manager created project documentation guidelines, again, to ensure the project will function effectively, that team members and stakeholders will be able to find documents as required and quickly and efficiently during the project. And so the documentation guidelines that were set up for this project, for the case study project, addresses the following: the storage location and organization as to where will the documents be, both electronic, but also if there were physical documents as well. And how they'll be organized. Is it a folder system? If they are, what are the folders? What are the categories of information, and so on? Document naming conventions. It's really important if without a naming convention, without a standard approach to naming files, you may have just a whole large number of documents that are kind of randomly named and maybe very vaguely, or they might be ambiguous names, and that makes it very difficult later. So a naming convention is recommended. And again, if you view the textbook, you'll see that naming convention. Document version. There are some documents, now not all documents, but some, it's required to keep different versions. For example, the project charter. Often when changes are made to it, a specific version is kept frozen and then a new version is created so that we can, at a later point, look at the first version or the second version of the project charter. That's not necessarily done for all documents. There's certain key documents that is done for. So key idea is to create guidelines to demonstrate how the project should store and organize project documents, how these documents should be named, and whether document versions are required. And again, see the project document guidelines example for the case study in the textbook in chapter 10. Okay, our next question, our last question, is how should project meetings be managed? So projects will have meetings, will have times that stakeholders of the project team and or other stakeholders will gather either physically or virtually to discuss or decide or for various reasons. And the communication management plan will often refer to a number of meetings. So part of the communication management plan usually is that there are a number of planned meetings during the project. The kickoff meeting, for example, is one such meeting. There might also be review meetings, the scope review and sign-off meeting, for example. Weekly status meetings might be another one. So the communication management plan will often refer to meetings. Now, formal project meetings should include, and we need to distinguish for a moment in terms of communications between formal communication and informal communication. Formal communication refers to things that are planned, that are points in time, and are documented through the processes that we're going to be showing. Those are formal modes of communication, or in this case, meetings. They're planned, they're scheduled, and they take place. There are often, or there's always informal communications, the types of communications that take place on a day-to-day basis between team members, as people see each other, or ongoing questions back and forth. Those are informal communications. Now, the processes that we're talking about in this part of this video lecture pertain to formal project communications, and in this case, meetings. It's not meant to be applied to all of the natural informal communications that take place. So it is for specific meetings that are scheduled. So keep that in mind. So formal project meetings should include the creation of a meeting agenda as to what's going to happen during the meeting, and the documentation of what took place during the meeting, which are called meeting minutes. So we have what's going to take place during the meeting is a meeting agenda. The documentation of what actually happened in the meeting is called the meeting minutes. And those are two documents that are created. Okay, so let's go to our case study video and see the process of creating a meeting agenda. So we'll watch this video.
Sophie scans the communication management plan and sees that the next meeting is the scope review meeting, so she starts to work on the agenda. She decides to invite Arun and the project team. Thinking about the meeting, she lists the topics to be included. For each topic, she includes the person who will present the topic and the amount of time to be allotted, making sure there is enough time to cover each topic and leave a few minutes at the end of the meeting in case any topics require a little more time. She knows from past experience that this sometimes happens during meetings. Once complete, she saves the information in the meeting agenda document and sends it to the meeting attendees a few days before the meeting.
Okay, so we saw the process of creating the meeting agenda. It's a fairly straightforward purpose where a document is created, again, before the meeting, and it contains information such as the name of the meeting, who is facilitating or organizing the meeting, the time and location of the meeting. If it was an in-person meeting, it would be the room number or building number and so on. If it was an online meeting, it would be the link, the way that the attendees would access the virtual meeting. The attendees, who is invited to the meeting, and finally, the topics to be discussed, including who will be leading the topic or presenting the information, and the anticipated amount of time required. So different organizations would put, perhaps, additional information in a meeting agenda, but this is generally the key or minimum information that you would need in a meeting agenda. For an example of a meeting agenda format, you can check chapter 10 of the textbook. And note that in the video, the agenda was sent a period of time before the meeting. So good practice is to send this out ahead of time. Like don't just present the agenda at the meeting itself. It's better to, and it's considered good practice to send this out ahead of time, a day or two ahead of time, if whenever possible, because that then allows the attendees to check the agenda, to understand what's going to be discussed, and so on. Okay, so now that we now look at, well, the actual meeting itself is conducting effective project meetings. Now, whoever is facilitating the meeting, then that was one of the things on the agenda, is who would be running the meeting. They should ensure that the agenda is followed, is that agendas are created for a reason, which is to guide. It's the plan. Think of it as the plan for the meeting. Someone should always be designated to record what happened during the meeting, which is referred to as the minutes of the meeting. Now, ideally, that should be somebody other than the facilitator. because it's a lot to both facilitate and record at the same time. It's much better if there's somebody else who is jotting down or typing in the ongoing interactions that occurred during the meeting. Okay, so that's good to designate that person, and one thing to think about is, well, what are the benefits of recording meeting minutes? Why would we do those things? So think about that. Consider that. But one of the key things is, well, a lot of discussion and decisions are going to be made. That meeting is being held for a purpose. You really don't want to leave it to the collective memories of the attendees as to what decisions were made or what information was discussed and so on. That's where good meeting minutes will record that. And then if there's a disagreement later, or if somebody wants to, ask the question, well, hey, wait a minute, didn't we discuss that during the meeting? What was the decision we made, 2 weeks ago? You can go back to the meeting minutes and look that up. So it really is beneficial to do so. So let's have a look at our case study video on this topic, and we'll see the process of conducting an effective meeting during the project.
As the scope review meeting is about to start, Sophie confirms with Fatijit that he will record the minutes of the meeting and lets him know that Eli will be unable to attend as he was invited to another meeting. She then starts the meeting.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this key milestone meeting. Special thanks for the project team for their hard work in getting the scope defined in such a short period of time. Before we begin the meeting, are there any additional topics to add to the agenda?
The team agrees that there are no additional items, and Sophie begins the meeting. She guides the meeting to cover each agenda topic and keeps her eye on the time to ensure that each topic stays within the time allotted. As each topic is concluded, the key discussions, decisions, and action items are summarized so that Fatijit can ensure this information is recorded accurately in the meeting minutes. Following the meeting, Sophie and Fatijit meet to review the meeting minutes. Based on this discussion, they make a few adjustments to the information, and then Sophie files both the agenda and the meeting minutes in the meeting agenda and minutes folder, as defined in the project documentation guidelines. Another successful meeting has been concluded. Checking the communication management plan, Sophie begins work on the next agenda.
Okay, so as usual, let's debrief what happened during that video. So we saw a meeting being conducted. You saw the facilitator, in this case Sophie, the PM, designate the business analyst, in this case Fatijit, as the person who would record the meeting minutes. So ensuring that somebody had that task within the meeting, and then her job was to keep it on track. To ensure that the timeline of the agenda was maintained. What you don't want to do is have a meeting duration end. Let's say the meeting was scheduled for an hour, and at the end of the hour you only covered 2 of the 4 topics because there was a lot of side conversations, or the conversation went on tangents into some other areas and so on. That's something that you want to avoid. You want to keep it on track. There may be times when the facilitator will say, okay, that's a good discussion, but we will talk about that separately outside the meeting so that we can maintain our agenda. Now, again, you always leave a little bit of time when you create an agenda. Leave a little bit of time, for those sort of spontaneous discussions. You don't want to make it the timeline too tight within a meeting, but the facilitator's job is to keep the meeting on track according to the agenda. You also saw during the meeting that there were times when the conversation, the discussion, the decisions were summarized so that the minute taker, in this case FattyJet, could record it effectively. So that's a good activity. That's a good thing for the facilitator to do. In terms of the meeting minutes itself, the document that is contained, it should contain information such as, again, the name of the meeting, that's the same as the agenda, who facilitated the meeting, that's from the agenda, unless it changed, unless that person wasn't available and somebody else took over, the date, time of the meeting, again, as per the agenda, unless it changed at the last minute, who attended. We saw in the video that one of the invitees, Eli, was unable to attend. Well, in that case, that would be noted on the minutes. And then each topic should be listed together with a summary of the discussion. So, each topic that was on the agenda that was then subsequently covered or discussed or, during the meeting itself, there should be a summary. That is, those are the minutes that are being what was discussed and decided. Any pertinent information should be recorded there. And then finally, a list of action items. Oftentimes coming out of meetings, there are things to do that will be done after the meeting at some point. Those should be listed specifically, and they're called action items. Okay, and they should be listed in the minutes. You can see an example of the meeting minutes for the case study for this video we just saw in the textbook, chapter 10. So again, key idea, plan for effective project meetings. And again, these are formal project meetings that include the use of agendas and minutes. Some key terminology introduced during this video lecture. And again, you can see a complete list in chapter 10 and a few of the references for the graphics used during this presentation. And that is the video lecture for chapter 10, Communications Planning.